one of my Own Your Expertise interviews. I'm Emily Crookston, owner and decider of all things at the Pocket PhD. I'm the ghostwriter for Rebels, Renegades, and Mavericks, and I love helping experts with big ideas get those ideas out of their heads and into the hands of their fans. If you're watching us live out there, we'd love for you to pop into the comments and say hi. It's always great to know who's out there watching us as we're doing this live. Today, I'm sitting down with Venus Liles. Venus is the founder and managing attorney at Liles Law, and that's her firm. It's a boutique law firm helping entrepreneurs and small business owners start and scale their businesses so they can focus on what matters to them. And full disclosure, Venus is my lawyer. I love working with her, and I'm so excited to do this interview with her today. Venus, thanks so much for speaking with me. Will you tell us a little bit more about who you work with and what you do?
Yes, thanks for having me, and I appreciate that disclosure. Lawyers love disclosures. So.
Right.
Yes, so as you mentioned, I'm Venus. I have my own firm. I've also, worked with bigger companies and still do. I'm a legal advisor to SaaS Institute, Inc., which is a huge software company out of Cary. And then I also have my own boutique firm, Liles Law, and we help small businesses like you and entrepreneurs all the way from entity setup through, hopefully scaling and growing and achieving all the dreams that you have for your business. And that's what I do.
Cool. I didn't realize you worked for the SaaS corporation and have your own business.
Yes.
Do you find that a difficult balance? Do you like having both? What do you
Yeah, I mean, I like having both. It's obviously just more work is challenging in general. But it's really been helpful to me because SaaS is so huge. I mean, they're $1 billion global software company. And then my own clients are sometimes really teeny tiny, just like one person out of their garage with a great idea. And so that has been a great balance, not only in a fulfilling way to be able to help the underdog in a lot of instances when they have kind of big law firms on the other side of the negotiations, but also just being able to see that a lot of the legal issues are similar. Obviously, bigger companies have bigger problems, like more money, more problems. But in many ways, like business owners just want to protect themselves. They want to protect their personal families and their personal accounts, but they also want to protect their business because whether or not it's huge or little, like it's your baby, and you just want to make sure that you do right by it. And so that feeling is there regardless of the size of the company, which is cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true. I mean, business is business, whether you're a solopreneur, whether you have a gigantic corporation that you're working with, right? Everyone has some similar concerns, at least when it comes to that, running a business and keeping it legal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. How would you describe your path to becoming an expert?
So there's the traditional route. So there's the long story of I went to law school. I graduated from Duke 10 years ago, and I've been doing the same kind of law ever since. So as they say, does it take 10,000 hours to be an expert at something? So I think just having done the same thing for 10 years has definitely helped pave that way. I worked at a big law firm out of law school, which is out of Raleigh, and I did corporate transactions. So commercial agreements, IP licensing, mergers and acquisitions, all of that stuff. And then I transitioned to SaaS, and then I also have my own firm. So just a lot of experience, a lot of years, a lot of hours. That's kind of the long answer. And then the more practical answer is just making a lot of mistakes, whether it's seeing the mistakes that I've made or seeing the mistakes other people have made. That has been a even more impactful learning experience for me than just the traditional path of law school, big firm, small company, small firm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder, how much law school can really prepare you for practicing law. I mean, it's like any other schooling or training that you get. I think you learn so much more once you get into it and get on the ground, right?
100%. Yeah. It just lays the foundation to be able to talk speak the language, right? Like to be able to understand the concepts, but to actually apply them, there's nothing like kind of the more project-based learning that happens when you're practicing law, when you have a client that you're helping, because everyone is so unique. And so in law school, they can teach you like the framework, but how you actually apply it to a client that has its own needs and challenges and risk threshold, that is completely different. And so I mean, in 10 years, I haven't done anything exactly twice, right? It's just, so every new project poses its own unique challenges, and that makes it fun, and that makes it, you know, different every time. And so it's not completely monotonous.
Right. That's good. Yeah. I think that's one of the concerns people have when they think about going into law. Like, oh, is it just going to be the same thing day in, day out? And isn't it true that a lot of law is like that? Like if you became the head attorney for a specific business, a specific corporation, wouldn't it be pretty monotonous in a lot of cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what you think of monotonous. I mean, when you work for one company, it's definitely you are in the zone of that company. But the lead attorney, so the general counsel for a company, the breadth of legal issues that they see is vast. So they see everywhere from, you know, HR issues, this employee did something crazy in their office, versus like if someone were, unfortunately, like the company were get sued, they were involved in this litigation. If there's IP, like the patent process for the company. So the type of projects that come up are, you know, pretty broad for that level. But that's the top person. Along the way, it's a little bit more narrow. But, you know, you have flexibility to, if you've been doing kind of the same thing for a few years and you want to move over and try to do something new, at least within a company, excuse me, that's possible. But like my husband is a criminal attorney. He is a public defender in Wake County. And so even though we're both attorneys, we do drastically different things. And I don't think, I mean, if we really wanted to, I think we could probably switch, but it'd be much more difficult 10 years on in our careers, having taken such, you know, divergent paths to then say, okay, well, now I want to be in an office, and I would say I want to be in the courtroom, like that. That would be slightly more difficult, I think.
Yeah, I see. So there's different things you could do sort of within the lane, right?
Yes,
like that's easy to switch. But then, yeah, I could see corporate law versus criminal defense is very, very different situation. And I imagine like some lawyers are in court, in trial, you know, running trials and doing trials a lot. And then some people are behind a desk most of the time, right? Doing
yes, that's exactly our dynamic.
Yeah.
He is on his feet all day.
Oh my gosh.
Trials a week, because he still does, like, he doesn't do the huge murder trials yet, which would be fewer but more significant. But he does, you know, several really important trials a week, and he is always like up negotiating with people in the courthouse. His office is in the courthouse.
Oh my gosh.
But he's rarely like in his office because he's always in court. And then meanwhile, like, I'm on a computer, like this is where you'll find me most of the time. The most dynamic part of my day is talking to you. Like the rest of the time, contract drafting, like really like solo work, like a lot of review. And that's why I kind of like helping the smaller businesses, because I get to converse with them. I get to kind of collaborate with them. But then the legal work is, you know, sometimes a little lonely.
Yeah, I bet. Tell us how you've learned to translate your expertise for others.
So it's difficult when your expertise is in almost like a different language. I mean, people call it legalese for a reason. I have learned, you know, one, to kind of explain why it's a different language. It's helpful to begin with, you know, like why do we say it this way? Why do we say, not, nevertheless, aforementioned, here too, like why do we use those words? And I can share with you why. One of the reasons is because those specific phrases have been found to mean a certain thing in court. So court cases will look at certain, provisions in a contract, for example, because that's what I practice, and they will say, okay, this means this thing, and so we're going to find this way for this particular party. And so lawyers say, okay, now we have some proof that a court will think that this means this thing. And so we're going to put it in the agreement exactly this way. So if this issue comes up and we go to court, we can point to that case law and say, hey, a different court found that this means this thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If we change that thing too much, we can still make that argument, but if all the words are different and it's, actually how people talk, it's just you have to go an extra step to prove that you meant the same thing as you meant before. So it's just, I know it like doesn't make sense amongst the parties that are negotiating to then have their attorneys translate it into what may seem like nonsense, but it's usually you're giving up a little bit of protection and a little bit of assurance. And so it's just a matter of risk. I mean, some people really want their contracts to be in plain language. That's really important to them. And as long as they understand the risk there, I think that's perfectly fine. The agreement should say what you want it to say. But sometimes people are more, risk conscious and they just want more surety, and that predictability is more important to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's like any other industry. Every industry has its own jargon, and there's shorthand for how they're talking about certain things, and that makes a lot of sense. That and it's cool that you can explain it that way. I really like that explanation. It makes a lot of sense. This is just the way we talk, and this is what triggers certain things in the judge's brain, and that's what we want when we're
that's what we want. We want that thing to get triggered, right? Like if that's the point we're trying to make, we want the judge we want to make it easy for him or her to side with what we want that provision to say. So if we're trying to protect your IP, let's not get too fast and loose with what the language says, because this is super important that they read this provision to say what we want it to say. So that would be the first, would be just explaining to them what that means. And then I have actually really found it to be helpful I am also an entrepreneur myself. So I have other sort of non-legal projects that I work on in different businesses that I'm dabbling in. And to have that framework has really helped me be able to translate the legal side, because now I understand the business side of it. And so I know kind of the thoughts and fears and concerns that business owners have. So then when I'm explaining the legal risks and how that ties into those concerns, that just seems to make more sense, being one of them as well.
Yeah, that makes really good sense too, because I think what's interesting is what I'm learning from you in this conversation is how practical law really is. I hadn't really thought of it in that way. I thought of it more theory, more, up in the clouds. But I think we tend to think of other disciplines in that way when we don't know very much about them. Like, oh, that's really ethereal. But in fact, when you get down to it, law is one of the most practical disciplines you can think of, because it really is about like, okay, this is a problem and here's how we're fixing it with this language and this contract. And,
yes, absolutely.
So it's really practical, in fact.
Yeah, especially what I do, it's super practical. Because what I do is I make sure that I encourage communication between parties, and then we document that. So really the point of any contract is to make sure that whatever you guys have decided is said and in writing, so that down the line, if anybody has a question about it, you can point back to it. And it just helps with the efficiencies of running a business, and reduces the risk of things being interpreted in different ways down the line. And so it's super practical. The times where the law does get kind of theoretical is in the shoulds. Like, should we be treating, the certain provisions this way? Should the justice system work in this way? Like, you can go down those shoulds, and they're super fascinating questions to have about our legal system and American law and politics in general. But as far as what I do, I don't have that much time to kind of just sit and think about the shoulds. Like, unfortunately, what I do is try to help businesses like move forward, and so it's much more practical and like, what are we going to do to achieve this goal? Let's do it and move forward. Right.
Very cool. Yeah. I think you can leave all the theory up to people who argue in front of the Supreme Court, right? And like the philosophers. I taught philosophy of law a couple of times, and that was all about the shoulds and over criminalization and the justice system and all of that. And so,
it's super fascinating. And it is a lot of what we did talk about in law school.
Oh, so,
that's why it's law school is interesting, but it doesn't prepare you 100% for the real world because it is a lot of shoulds, and it's preparing people to think a certain way. So lawyers should always kind of be questioning. So like, is this the way we should be doing things, all the way down to the contract drafting? Like, what is the best way to do this? Should we do it just because other people do it? Like, you always want to be questioning, but you know, there's nothing like hands-on experience to be able to help other people like in a more practical way.
Right. Do you have any guidelines or hard and fast rules for maybe solopreneurs thinking about whether they might need a contract?
Yes. So I personally encourage always having something in writing. So, you know, whether it's, you know, the pushback I get sometimes is like, but it's my uncle or it's my best friend, or when it's not, you know, a big corporation on the other side, people are a little bit more hesitant to put a contract in place. But I often tell a story about when I was like 10 years old, and I was asking my dad for, I was actually asking my dad for a skip it. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I remember skip it. Yeah.
And all day I was like asking him for a skip it. Like this one Saturday, like I couldn't get it out of my head. And he was like, I will butcher his accent, but he was pretty much like, Venus, which is what he used to call me. You know, you always want something, skip it this, skip it that. I'll give you $100 on your 16th birthday and you can buy whatever you want. And I was like, okay, like that sounded cool because I was 10. So to him, like 16th birthday was forever. And I went and got a piece of paper and I wrote down like, I, Dad, will promise to give Venus $100 on her 16th birthday. And he signed it. And I kept it. I kept it for 6 years. And on my 16th birthday, I like pulled it out and he laughed and he gave me $100, which wasn't, you know, as I wanted like a car on my 16th birthday.
Right. You're like, what about anything?
But I like to tell that story because like, I loved my dad. Like I did not distrust him. He had never broken any promises, but like, one, to have it in writing to make sure that he said $100, you know, was that really what he said? Like that seemed like a lot to a 10-year-old. Did he say my 16th birthday or my 60th birthday? Like to just have that in writing, one, to be able to make sure that we were on the same page was a huge, you know, advantageous point. And then, you know, memories fade. Like you might have, you know, you might be on the same page as your business partner and you agree to everything, but you might not remember what it was that you agreed to 6 years down the line. So in this case, like, I don't think my dad would have lied to me, but if I hadn't ever brought it up and on my 16th birthday, I mentioned that, like, would he truly remember? Like, I really don't think he would have remembered it. And so that just kind of serves as a good example for just anytime, you know, you're agreeing to something with somebody, like whether it's a promise, whether I'm going to do this, you do that, like, you know, it's just always best to have it in writing. And that almost shows kind of respect for the business relationship. That means that like, I'm serious about this. This means a lot to me. I want to make sure that both of us are taken care of. So let's make sure we put whatever is in our head on paper so that down the line, we don't have as many disagreements about he said, she said sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, I really love the framing of that. And the story is amazing. That's so cool. Yeah, because you know, it makes so much sense that, you know, you don't have to think of a contract as being an adversarial thing. And, you know, it's because I don't trust you that I need you to sign this thing, right? It's just that, you know, whose memory is that good? You're right. Like when we sign contracts, it's often for a long period of time. It's not usually something for next week, you know? Yeah. So you're not going to remember what you agreed to, right? That makes really good sense. And yeah, so I could see that. And I think you can also say that a contract, like my contract for ghostwriting isn't that complicated. It's, I don't know, 5 pages maybe or something like that. And you know, so I think it's easy to think that, oh, this is overkill, you know, for what I'm doing. I don't need 1,000 pages like when you buy a house, you know. But there's different types of contracts for different situations, and a lawyer can definitely help you navigate like what that looks like.
Absolutely. And I think your clients take you more seriously. Like you may not want to put a contract in front of them because you just want the deal to get done and you want to, you know, onboard them as a client. But I actually think they do take you more seriously and kind of respect that you're running a legitimate business and that you don't want to get into a business relationship without making sure everybody's on the same page. So when you have a contract and you kind of take the time to, you know, perhaps walk them through what the different provisions mean, the client actually feels taken care of as well, because if there's something that you promised as the service provider that's not in there, then they have a chance to get that in writing too. So it's not meant to be one-sided. It's really meant to be a documentation of what each party is agreeing to, so that they have that to refer back to in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Last question. What would you say has helped you the most in learning to own your expertise?
What has helped me the most? I think realizing that I don't have to know everything has been almost like a comfort to me. So in the beginning of my career, you know, when you're just out of law school, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you're supposed to know. But now, 10 years down the line, I'm very comfortable with, you know, telling a client or a friend, like, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to find out for you or point you in the right direction. We will solve this problem together, but I don't have to have it all in my head all of the time. And that just comes with, you know, experience, to feel like that's okay to say that, and it's okay to not have all the answers.
Right. I like that. It's almost paradoxical. To be an expert is to be able to say, I don't know. Like, I can find out, but I don't know the answer. Yeah, I really like that, because I think it's so important to know our strengths and weaknesses. It's so important not to just bullshit your way through something that right, you don't know, especially as a lawyer. I mean, you probably know better than anyone. You don't want to say the wrong thing, because it could come back to bite you for sure. But yeah, that confidence of, I don't have to know, you know, I don't have to have all the answers, because no one does.
No one does. Yeah, no one does. And if they say they do, then they're probably, you know, not
exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to talk about the new business ventures that you're getting into? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so completely unrelated to law, I wrote a children's book earlier this year, actually at the very beginning of the pandemic, and it is called Luna Stays Home, available on Amazon, and it was there to help explain the coronavirus and social distancing to little kids. So I have 2 little girls, and you know, when things change drastically, it is nice, at any time there's a transition, it is nice to have a book to kind of show them that other people are going through the same thing. And there just wasn't one, obviously, about something that we haven't gone through before, luckily. And so I decided to write one. So that was earlier this year in April. And then my kind of newest endeavor is this product that I'm working on, centered around gift giving and how to make it more authentic, and how to connect people that may not be physically together. And so I'm working on, you know, tags that will be able to hopefully include some sort of video feature where people can, you know, explain the reason for their gift, or, you know, their excitement over the event, and just be able to connect people more on that level.
Awesome. I love those. Yeah, very different from law, but a new kind of direction, which is awesome. Yeah, very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun to do something completely different. I think it also gives you a fresh perspective, you know, like I said, on the legal aspects of it, just being a business owner, because I obviously do my own legal stuff. You know? And so it just helps to walk a different path.
Yeah, very cool. You're keeping busy during the pandemic, and I like it.
I mean, we're
lots of ideas, right? Awesome. Well, it's been really great to sit down with you, Venus. Thank you for this conversation. Would you like to tell people how they can find out more about you?
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really fun chat. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Venus Liles. I think I'm probably the only Venus Liles on LinkedIn. There. And if you want to find out more about my firm, it's lileslaw.com. So it's liles-law.com.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much.
Take care.